And we bring back Fred Brown, the man with the good news, we hope, about the new COVID variant that's apparently started in South Africa. Now I hear it's in Canada. I worry that it's going to come to Michigan soon.
It probably already is here.
Ah.
All right. So first of all, do you pronounce it Omicron or Omicron? I've heard both.
My Greek isn't so good as it used to be, you guys. How's it all going?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Omicron.
Omicron. Okay.
As an omega. Yes.
Right.
Yes. They skipped new because they were concerned that it was not new. Didn't want to say there may be another new one after this one. And they skipped G because it's a popular Chinese name. And they decided they didn't want to have any more problems with that anymore.
Okay, yeah, that could be, naming it the new variant could be a real who's on first situation there. I think. So, yeah. Okay.
So I think they were smart in their naming, and Omicron sounds sort of tough, doesn't it? So yeah, sounds like
Sort of forbidding. Yes, right. Yeah.
I saw your protege, Dr. Fauci, on several shows Sunday and today. He was optimistic about this. He thought, well, we don't know enough about it to be worried yet. So let's not be worried, right? So,
yes, he is. He's always hopeful, and I admire that. But I thought I'd at least tell you what we know about the facts so far, if it's helpful, and that we're developing more. As he said, we don't know enough yet to get to start making policy around it. But in the next 2 weeks, we will. And so I have a couple of slides. If it's helpful, I can show you a few.
Oh, yeah. Let me do that for you here.
Sure.
I keep forgetting that share screen. All right. You should be good to go.
Let me see if I can find it here. So.
All right.
So the Omicron. We don't know much yet. I mean, I've been monitoring this for just over a week. So, and I had Thanksgiving in between. So we have a long way to go with our understanding of it. But I thought I'd at least tell you where we are right now.
Take us to your slide.
Yeah, the full
Can you see it now?
Is down at
Full
the bottom.
screen, yeah.
Full screen at the bottom.
Right there. There you go.
Beautiful. So this is as of today. And I thought I'd kind of give you a context. The context right now is today over half the world's population has some form of protection, which is pretty good. When you think about how fast this has come on and how much we have to worry about this, we've been doing a good job. And the United States is sadly just above average. We're about the 50th best country in the world right now. Despite having developed this vaccine, we're still behind most of our wealthy nations. As you can see, most of the wealthy upper middle income, even wealthy nations, are 84.6%. We're just at around 60, and even the upper middle is over 75%. So we are well behind our peers in vaccination levels. And what makes that even more concerning is full protection is low. And right now, we haven't announced it yet, but we will soon, that full protection means you've had 2 vaccines and a booster shot this year. And right now, you can see that most of the rest of the world's wealthy countries are doing that. And they are now starting to measure exactly where they stand. And you can see that for the Delta virus, we need a herd immunity vaccination rate of full protection of just over 95%, we think, based on transmissibility. And right now, you can see that France, Israel, and so on are getting pretty darn close. They're over 90%, but they're not quite at the 95% level. And countries like Austria were so far off from the 95% level. And Europe has a much more densely packed population. And so when the viruses come into Europe, it really spreads much faster than the United States. So they're probably 3 months ahead of us, 2 months ahead of us. Austria actually had to shut down their country, require vaccines, without exception, in order to get to pull down from where they were with a huge outbreak that they had just a couple of weeks ago, and now they're starting to finally turn that around. But you can see that was a mandate that caused the Austrian pink line to decline that as rapidly as it did. Now, when you look at that level, where do you think we are? when you think about levels of full protection.
Not good, not too good, I imagine.
Off
We
the chart.
We are way off the chart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're right now, we'd have to have a chart that went up to 65% to show up.
Hmm.
Oy.
That's not good, right? So that's really not very good. Here's the calculation, right? Here's the first and second shot. You can see that here are the shots per day that people are vaccinated, dose administered per day. You can see that what we would have anticipated is that, in fact, you'd have a repeat of this mountain of vaccines that occurred on April 15th. Now, some of those were already second shots, so we didn't anticipate a full repeat. But if you take an account for that second shot, we'd expect that over 2.5 million people a day would be getting their booster shots right now if they were in sync of a 1, 2 plus 6 months plus a booster. They should be, we should be at 2.5 million shots a day just to keep up with where we are currently with protections. And in fact, when you take out the stragglers who are 500,000 a day, and the 5 to 18-year-olds, which weren't part of the sampling, at that peak, we are probably about 50% lagging in what we should be in the booster space, which means when you look at the overall cumulative vaccines, here we are, about 25% are boosted, about 13% have shots within the last 6 months, and the rest of us are either unvaccinated or haven't had our booster. And that's a 65% number. It may be 62, but it's in that range. And you can see the boosters really make a huge difference. And I wrote a note a couple of weeks ago saying, please, before Thanksgiving, for goodness sake, get your booster. And then, thank goodness, the FDA came out about a week later and said, yeah, get your boosters. But it was already an extra week into the cycle that we should have been already knowing that boosters were effective. This is the results of booster shot of boosters already happening this summer. And we know that in Israel, for example, it was 700,000 people vaccinated and unvaccinated, 91%, I'm sorry, boosters versus unboosted, 91% reduction in symptomatic disease, 93% reduction in hospitalizations, 81% reduction in death after a 6-month period versus a no booster. So this really makes a difference. And if you haven't gotten your vaccine yet, please do get your vaccine. If you haven't been boosted yet, and it's been over 6 months, please get your booster right away. It really does change the levels of protection you have against this disease. Now, with that backdrop, how do you think we are ready for Omicron? Good, bad?
I will assume not good.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried. I'm more worried than Tony.
Ah.
But of course, I'm a worrier. And you can see this little glip up in South. This is the South African, they went through 3 waves, just like they're coming into their 4th wave now. And this doesn't look like much, right? But when you magnify this, when you realize that over the period of 2 weeks, they've tripled their tripled their incidence, and it's really starting to show that logarithmic growth that we're talking about. We know that that something is happening in South Africa, because they shouldn't have come back this fast, right? If you look at the other patterns down below and those flat periods, they last for a few months. We're talking about a matter of weeks, and all of a sudden it's turning back up again. That's really scary. Now, if you look at, I'm sorry, this is a little bit out of order. If you look at the United States, we're going to have bigger problems with these boosters among the Black and Hispanic populations. Unfortunately, the Asian and white populations are actually boosting at a rate much higher than anticipated. And the Black and Hispanic populations are boosting at a much lower rate than anticipated, about half the rate that we would have anticipated if they were on track. So that's just more of a context about how these communities, they do get together, they do congregate, and sadly, the more concentrated, the higher concentrations of non-boosted, non-vaccinated people, you're going to get opportunities for a real fast infection spread. And so when you look at South Africa, they have the same kind of thing. And what's interesting about South Africa, once you started seeing it in South Africa, of course, then South Africa doesn't test as much as we'd like. They don't sequence as much as they'd like. So when they get a positive test, about slightly less than 1% or 0.8% of those people who said, hey, you've got COVID, that sample will then be sent on to a genetic testing lab. That genetic testing lab will then test and say, aha, it's a sequence that indicates Omicron. So with Omicron, our best canaries in the coal mine are these groups up here, like Iceland and Denmark, and Australia that are sequencing, 20, 30, 40, 50% of everything that comes back positive. When you sequence at that rate, you're going to detect this really quick. And so sure enough, Denmark found 2 right away. The Netherlands, which is I think number 12 or 13 on the list, found it right away. Germany found it right away. And South Africa, of course, even though it's not testing very much, because they were oversampling in a university area that has pretty good sequencing of their positive tests, they saw quite a few of them pretty quickly. And this is where we think it originated in Botswana, crossed over to the Northern Territory of South Africa, and started replicating fast in South Africa, where we're detecting it now. And so that's what you're seeing. And of course, Australia also coming in with all these, and you can see this follows basically the routes of travel traffic. Now, what would be most concerning to you guys if the one that we are most concerned about actually is happening in Canada? And do you know why?
No.
I haven't heard.
That guy didn't travel and didn't get into any contact that he knows about with anyone who's traveled. He's out in the middle of the boondocks. And it means it's community spreading already.
Yeah, it's in the air already. Right.
Yeah. So that one is the most worrisome. And what happened in Hong Kong was the guy came back from South Africa, tested positive. They sequenced it. It was the Omicron variant. He was put into a hotel, and the guy in the hotel room across the hallway also got it. So it's super transmittable and through the air, which we already knew. And when you look at the amount of viral load that the PCR tests are showing, it shows really high numbers of viral load in the nasomucosal areas of these patients. 18 to 19 CT values are high. They're not off the charts high, but they're high. They're plenty high enough to spread this really fast. And what you can see is they started to compare. Remember, we had the alpha variant, then we had the beta variant, then we had the delta variant, and each of those were slightly worse, right? And so this is B11529, and that is should be 592, by the way. Apologies, that was a misprint by the Financial Times. That's
Mike and I caught that right away.
Oh, of course, yeah, I noticed that, but I didn't want to say anything. So
sorry about that. So at any rate, you can see the difference in penetration that they're concerned about based on what we have in terms of very little data so far, but it's starting to accumulate that this thing is really really starting to spread fast. And when you start to look at how fast it could spread, what we're already seeing, here's the Gauteng province sample. That's near the Botswana border. That's Johannesburg, it's Pretoria. So big cities are affected in South Africa here. All of South Africa you can see, and basically we think that it moved into the Gauteng province probably 25 days ago, and it's over 90% of the samples in Gauteng. That's indicates the kind of pathway we're on. And when you look at overall South Africa, our best sampling of that actually was on that airplane, right? We had a good sampling of South Africans. They had 61 infected patients, of whom I think 13 were Omicron, and that means 20%. And that's overall, that's a kind of general population of South Africa sample. And sure enough, that means it's already hitting 20%. And we think it's spread across all of South Africa in the last 10, 15 days. That's how fast we think this thing could end up spreading once we start to see it in the United States. And we will sadly start to see it in the United States pretty quick.
Well, Fred, I think the big fear that people have is that this variant is able to defeat the protection you get from the vaccine, that you may get it, but you're much less likely to get really sick or die. So
yeah, let me talk a little bit
about that yet, or we don't really know.
Oh yeah, we don't know what it's like in the field. We can tell a little bit about the genetics already. So let me go into that quickly. So there are two kinds of ways things evolve, right? One is sort of slow progression, evolution, and then there is revolutionary, right? Where you suddenly have a burst of change. And what happened with Omicron virus is we didn't see, it came onto the scene with 55 variants, with 55 mutations, right? Normally you see, you have 5, 6, 7, 10 around the first generation. Then it takes you 2, 3, 4, 5 generations to get to 20 mutations. Then it takes you another, 15, 25, 30, 40, 50 more generations to get to, the 15, 20 mutations and so on, right? But here, this thing burst on the scene with 54 mutations. And that means is that it probably mutated in someone that was cultivating it, gently nurturing it in a sort of a broth that was partly vaccinated, partly unvaccinated, probably an immunocompromised patient, right? Slowly giving it, allowing it to mutate until finally it burst forth, and it was just super powerful on day one, rather than starting with a couple of mutations, mutating over time over generations. This thing came on with a heck of with more mutations than we've ever seen before in the first generation, and it's still mutating. You can see that now second generation, third generation, we're getting now we're getting up towards 60 mutations. And here what we know about the mutations so far. We know that these mutations are going to be associated with resistance to neutralizing antibodies, and that includes the monoclonal antibodies, especially those coming from Lilly, but the ones we think are better protected from this particular mutation are going to be AstraZeneca and Vir antibodies. But the Lilly antibodies probably are not going to be as effective against this particular, certainly the polyvalent antibodies and the antibodies people have as a result of getting infected before aren't going to be as effective. Then there's a cluster of mutations that we know are associated with much more efficient cell entry, and that means it's going to be much more transmissible. So we have a large amount of transmittable virus in the nose, and that then moves into the body when you inhale it, when you get close to someone and inhale what they breathe, and then that then is more transmissible once it gets into your body. So you've got less of a chance to respond before it really gets to overwhelming numbers. Then we have deletions that are effectively helping to stop your interferon, your interferon response, and also affects transmissibility because the interferons block it from getting into the cells when it gets into your body. And then we've got two more mutations that are part of the whole sheath coat, which are associated with increased infectivity. And that makes us a little bit worried because we're worried it may actually become slightly more virulent. We're hoping it doesn't. We're hoping it may even be less virulent. We don't know this yet, but if it's less, if it causes less disease, that would be nice because it'll knock out Delta. It's more powerful than Delta transmittability wise. But if it's less virulent, that would mean that we don't have as many hospitalizations. If it's more virulent, it means that it's going to transmit and force more and more people to the hospital faster, and could easily overwhelm our hospital systems. And that's when we get our highest death rates, when our hospital systems are overwhelmed by the viral load. It's not so much that we can't treat these viruses today at the levels they're at. Getting to be more and more effective over time. The problem is when you get overwhelmed healthcare and hospitalization at that point, and you start running out of drug and so on, that really starts to be a problem. Now, the big issue is the spike protein. That's because our best defense right now is vaccines. And of course, we're going after the spike protein because that's the proteins that are exposed because they have to attach to the cell. And because they're exposed, it means our antibodies can attach to those exposed parts of the virus and block it from entering the cell. Now, here are the different viruses. There are 32 viruses on the spike protein. We've never seen that many before. To give you a sense of this, the Delta virus has 8. And you can see that it's not just the Delta virus; it actually has the Beta virus and Mu. Well, at that point, it was the Mu virus, as well as the South African virus. All those mutations are in the spike protein, and they've been repeated here, plus some new ones we've never even seen before. Those purple ones. All those purple ones, those are all brand new. We don't know how to really what to expect from those. The green ones, there's only one green one. That's what we've seen on all the others. that's the basic mutation. And then the rest are new in this case, and the reds are bad. And you can see how many reds there are here. That's sort of scary. So that indicates that our antibody protections, right? We can either have antibody protection from being infected before, convalescent antibody, which are antibodies that are spun down from other people who've been infected and injected into you. Monoclonal antibodies, which are special antibodies that are focused just on the neutralization ones. Those are the Lilly, AstraZeneca, Vir Bio. Those are the ones that are especially just for you. And then single neutralizing monoclonals, probably our most effective opportunities. And then the last issue is, of course, those antibodies that we create after we get vaccinated. And all those are being affected by these mutations. Now, if we have to create a new vaccine, here's the kind of time frame where we're thinking will probably occur. We think it's going to look a little bit like the flu vaccine. And for the flu vaccine, we create a DNA, we isolate which flu we're going to go after. Then we create a DNA template. And that takes, that after we have a sequence, we decide we're going to go after something, 1 to 5 days, you're there. And then you formulate the vaccine. That takes about 60 days typically. Then you have to do some immunogenicity testing. You want to make sure you've got neutralizing antibodies. You want to make sure you've got those antibodies neutralizing the virus. And you do that usually in the test tube. And that's usually sufficient because the FDA is convinced about the platform. We've injected over 4 billion people with these things. So we're pretty convinced that it's a safe platform. And at that point, we don't have to repeat the safety studies. We don't have to repeat the efficacy studies because we see the neutralization that we require. And then we have FDA has to do a risk benefit. In this case, the FDA might make Omicron and say, it's just not worth the risks of introducing a new vaccine. Benefits aren't high enough. But if we're having a big outbreak, it'll say very quickly within 25 days, yes, the benefits certainly outweigh the risks. And if we want to introduce a new vaccine, at which point the manufacturers will have already started manufacturing. And right now we're at about 1 billion. We're going to be able to manufacture about 7 billion doses next year. So that means in a month we can certainly get kind of 500 million doses out. And the CDC approval takes another 10 days or so. And so right now, what Moderna and Pfizer are thinking about is, do we need to have just another booster shot? Maybe a slightly enhanced booster shot? And Moderna's already done all those tests, so we know that it's safe if they want to do that. And then maybe a 4th dose for those most at risk. And again, Israel's already doing 4th dose, so we know that's pretty safe. We want to do something Omicron specific. That's going to take this full, 100 to 120 day process. And it'll take us some time to ramp everything up, even if we started to make a bet before we got full approval. And then finally, we can do a polyvalent test. We've already vaccine. We've already done Delta. We've already done Beta. The Pfizer and Moderna have both got those vaccines completed already. So they're already at the point of the 15-day. They've already even done immunogenicity testings. They decided it wasn't necessary to go after Beta separately or Delta separately, but Omicron may be the exception here. We may have to create one, and so that would be a middle of the road approach where we give you something a little bit more effective. You get your 2 basic vaccines. We give you something just for Beta or Delta, and then we move to Omicron when we're ready. That buys us a little bit more time if we really have a huge outbreak and problem. So that brings us to, if these vaccines are going to be less effective, what kind of drugs do we have? And luckily, we've got a couple of big new drugs that have come out. Merck's come out with a big drug, and Pfizer come out with a big drug. Merck is going to be looked at tomorrow. So if you want to listen to that on the FDA, you can. I can listen to all the reviews. It's about 30% effective in high-risk patients. Those are unvaccinated patients. We haven't tested either of these drugs with vaccinated people yet. It does reduce hospitalizations. You can see 9.7 versus 6.8%. That's kind of that's not bad. It's 40% reduction hospitalization. But you can see the most important one is deaths, right? No deaths versus 9 deaths in the placebo group. Pfizer's is even better. It's a better drug between us guys. It's 89% effective. It had a 10-fold increase reduction in 91% reduction in hospitalizations, and again, no deaths versus 7 deaths in the placebo group. Both of these drugs are so effective that we decided to stop them in the middle of the testing process. And you can see that there are some challenges with Pfizer because in order to get it formulated so that you didn't have to inject it or make it a tablet form, you have to take it with ritonavir. And ritonavir is an old drug, pretty cheap, which is great. and that stops the drug itself, the polymerase inhibitor drug, which is taken with ritonavir. It stops the polymerase inhibitor from breaking down before it hits the cells that need to have the cell. But you can see there's some drug, there are some drug interactions with statins and blood thinners. So if you have statins and blood thinners, these are contraindicated, but you still can take the Merck drug. And in the case of Pfizer, this is specifically created for just SARS, initially for SARS-1. And with Merck, it was actually repurposed. It was done for encephalitis, but they've also done it for influenza and RSV. So we've got a pretty good basis of data along here. And you can see these have different mechanisms of action. And right now, my guess is they're both coming out at about $700 a dose. Here are the basic mechanisms of actions, right? The first mechanism of action we have is we want to prevent transmission, and that transmission prevention is your mask. So wear your masks. When you're not sure about people who are around you, try to stay in the shelter, in open areas. Try to keep your distance, right? That's all your transmission pieces. Then it has to actually access the cell, and that's where antibodies and vaccines in your body stop it from entering your cell, because it's going to attach itself to all those little red dots and it'll prevent it from actually getting in and attaching itself to the cell. Once it gets into the cell, if it breaks through the antibody and vaccine, and we're seeing some breakthrough now as these vaccines get older, it starts to translate and replicate. And the Pfizer drug stops the replication with proteases. What happens is in order to be effective, these viral chains that the virus brings in have to be cut down, protease, and they cut them down, and then they're much faster in replication. Pfizer stops that breaking down for faster replication of the viral proteins, and that then stops really interferes with the replication of the virus. The remdesivir from Gilead and the Merck drug, they stop at the next level, which is actually during replication. They kind of get the virus confused by inhibiting the actual translation of the virus. They actually insert new base pairs in, and suddenly the virus is reading nonsense, and you create a huge paper jam in the reading of the drug. The difference between remdesivir and molnupiravir is that remdesivir, you've got to be in the hospital for 5 days, and it costs you $3,100. Molnupiravir costs less, and you can do that at home with a pill, just like you can with Pfizer. And that's the real big difference. If you can figure out, you've got COVID within 3 to 5 days, preferably within 3 days, then you can take these drugs, and they're very effective in stopping the replication of the virus. So unfortunately, Omicron has a lot in its portfolio. Here are all of the different mutations, and you can see the first group are the 32 spike protein mutations. And those, so we can tell that we're thinking that probably the amount of neutralizing antibody you get as a result of taking vaccine may be affected by as much as 5 to 8-fold. But it still may be effective to stop the disease, and it will certainly, we think, be effective in stopping severe disease. But we still have some tests to run there. You can see that there are a couple of additional ones that actually potentially could interfere with the Pfizer drug or the Merck remdesivir drug. So those are also concerning, because now we're looking at a virus that could have defenses against our best vaccines and our best drugs. So we're hoping not. We have a lot more testing to do, but it's important to kind of be safe over the next 2 to 6 weeks. Certainly through Christmas time. Please mask when you don't know what your environment is, who's around you. If you want to protect people who haven't been vaccinated or who are at risk. Vaccinate if you can, certainly boost, and test if you're going to be with people as much as you can. These tests are pretty cheap. They're reasonably sensitive. They will detect We believe they will detect the Omicron virus because of the epitopes they detect. So the testing that currently you've got available, you won't have to buy new ones. Just use the ones you've got. Minimize your travel. Don't be too mobile. I know it's shopping season. Try to buy stuff at home. Try to keep distance. And in 2 weeks or so, we can talk again. What do you guys think?
Well, I guess the big question on everybody's mind is, are we going to face another lockdown over the winter? Because we're just starting to get the economy restarted and everything else. And there's great concern out there. You know, you obviously want to be safe, but at the same time, you got to make a living. And how's that going to work out?
Yeah. And, you can see where the concern is. I think certainly if there are more people who are boosted, we'll have much less transmission and severe disease to worry about. So vaccination and boosting will help us prevent those kind of mandates. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is the same parts of the state governments who say no mandates also are representing a lot of people who don't want to get vaccinated. And that combination is really what actually causes these mandates to become required because you just get overwhelmed, right? Once you start having to fly people around from one state hospital system to another state hospital system, once you start to have lots of transmission between unvaccinated and vaccinated parts of the population and groupings of these unvaccinated people, it's hard to stop. It's almost impossible to stop something without coming down pretty hard and fast. And the problem is that in order to come down hard and fast, you frequently have to act much sooner than the general public is aware of. Like in South Africa, they actually have to respond right now, even though they only have about 1,000 people who are affected. And we may have to do the same thing if people don't heed the warning of this is a pretty serious situation, and please do now really get vaccinated. Because if we don't, the next step will be overwhelmed hospitals, and at which point we may have our hands tied in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, the federal judge in Missouri this morning, you probably saw that, overruled the Biden mandate that everyone get vaccinated in 10 of the states. I think those were 10 Republican states, because unfortunately, this whole thing has become political where it really shouldn't have. So I don't know where that's going to go from here, but those 10 states now don't have to force people to get vaccinated.
Yeah. I'm not sure how it got so political either. We've got these we literally have some really great vaccines. And unfortunately, what's interesting is if you do the analysis, well, we find that there are a lot of highly vaccinated, what we call blue areas of the country that are adjacent to very unvaccinated red areas of the country. So if you're in a purple state like Michigan, we've got a lot of people who are highly vaccinated in the southern part, not so vaccinated in the northern part. And we got a lot of mixing, especially with winter holidays. You want to go hunting and, you want to do snowmobiling and all that. It's all up in the up north. And everyone's going to go skiing this year for sure. And that causes the mixing. So it doesn't really matter, sadly. It matters a lot. But sadly, you're getting a lot of, even if you got a red or a blue, they're very close together, and it's very hard to actually separate and keep one group safe versus another.
Okay. All right. So we'll try to get you back on the show here in a couple of weeks when we know more. What do you think, Fred?
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I'll give you some more information about Michigan. It was too much to talk about. And Michigan has a whole bunch of interesting things to talk about, but we didn't get there today. I just wanted to give you a sense of where we were with Omicron. It certainly is something that please continue to kind of monitor. And if it gets bad, I'll write a note to you guys.